bit more about these kind of myths that are surrounding Magna Carta. Really kind of how it is being used today in terms of political debate and trying to turn it back onto the debate regarding the Human Rights Act and the potential Bill of Rights. So coming up after Ian's talk and Henry's talk, I think it's clear to see that me describing the Magna Carta as undergoing mission creep is probably being incredibly generous towards Magna Carta, but seeing as it is its birthday, we're supposed to be generous towards it, so forgive me for that. So, in terms of the kind of actual text of Magna Carta, and the links between the Magna Carta and the human rights that are being stressed today. So David Cameron today notion that if we were to pass a UK Bill of Rights, we would enshrine the legacy of Magna Carta into UK law. Reference to Magna Carta, as you've heard, have also been used by the signatories to the US Declaration of Independence. It is also mentioned during the drafting of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I will get to these in just a little bit, but I want to just say briefly about, in terms of the Magna Carta, in terms of the people that it actually refer to, in terms of the concept of individual rights, the universality of rights. Can we find that in the Magna Carta? And straight away the answer is no. So it is very much a kind of a feudal document, so there is a lot of reference to kind of the divisions that you would find in feudal society. So you had free men specifically are mentioned. You also have mentions of barons, of knights, and of the clergy. So it really is referring to these different concepts in society. You don't see this whole claim to universality that you do get in kind of later human rights treaties. So ultimately, as Henry said, it did ultimately benefit just a very small section of society. But in terms of kind of specific sections of society that we might recognise today, for example, women, what does Magna Carta say about them? Well, firstly, one of the provisions of the original Magna Carta was that it did prevent a widow from having to enter into a subsequent arranged marriage, which I suppose is some kind of progression. However, it also says this with regards to women in the Magna Carta, is that no one shall be arrested or imprisoned upon the appeal of a woman for the death of any other than her husband. So when we see free man in the Magna Carta, when we see the reference to freeman in the Magna Carta, it really is referring to a quite kind of narrow concept of a human being that we do see in subsequent human rights treaties. You also do see kind of references to certain ethnicities. So as Henry mentioned, it's a war treaty, so there's reference to the Welshmen. We've also heard reference to the Jews in it. Then in kind of when you had the transposition of kind of English law over to Ireland, which is arguably one of the kind of proto-colonies that you can see, access to English courts was refused to Irishmen up in late 1270s, early 1300s, when you began to get the courts established. Irishmen were expressly refused access to English courts. Very often, in order to get access to these courts, you would see that people would kind of change their names. So they would anglicise their names from Irish names into English names to try and claim their English lineage and give them access to English courts. It also was, and to kind of emphasise this importance of having kind of an English lineage, it was considered defamatory to actually call an English person Irish. So you can see at the time that when we were drafting kind of documents like this, trying to claim their universality as applying to all human beings is certainly kind of stressing it. But I don't want to be too harsh on Magna Carta because it is, of course, a document of its time. And it can evolve, and as we've heard, it can take on this myth position. As Henry said, this myth really gained kind of leverage with the evolution by Cook. And it really was seized upon in the US Declaration of Independence, and the American colonists really did rely upon it when they drafted their famous kind of aspirational idea of a democracy and of human rights. And in the US Constitution, in this kind of Declaration of Independence, not the Constitution before that, it states this famous statement that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Of course, this immediately raises the question of what we mean by men. Well, obviously, straight away it doesn't mean women, again, but it also doesn't mean all men, which was famously kind of expressed in the famous Supreme Court decision of Dred Scott, which denied access to courts to Native Americans and African Americans, who was the plaintiff in this instance. So again, this idea of rights applying to everybody wasn't seen even in the US Declaration in the 1800s. Really, we don't see it perhaps until after World War II, and we see it in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So we did have it in the 20th century, early 20th century, as we heard mentioned before, with it being used by the suffragette movement as a claim to their enfranchisement. It was incredibly important. And then it really was seized upon then in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Eleanor Roosevelt in particular. And this time, in the text of the Universal Declaration, we see mention that it applies to all human beings. Language of everybody has these rights. So clearly, if this document is being inspired by Magna Carta, 700 years later we are seeing this kind of progression, this evolution of the kind of principles that are contained therein, which I would like to describe as it undergoing kind of mission creep. Now, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights doesn't have any teeth. Okay, it's a purely aspirational document. It wasn't until subsequent treaties. In terms of the UN context, you have the ICCPR. In terms of Europe, you have the Council of Europe and the European Convention of Human Rights. And again, this is a document that's claiming kind of universality. So if we want to claim the legacy of Magna Carta is influencing all these documents, then we have to say that Magna Carta has clearly undergone mission creep. It has clearly evolved from what it was supposed to be 700 years ago. Obviously has done that. And I just want to stress that at this time, today, we are celebrating Magna Carta precisely because of its mission creep, while at the same time those arguments are being used to criticise and undermine the European Convention of Human Rights by saying it has completely evolved from what it was envisaged, what Winston Churchill envisioned it as being back in 1950. And I would contend in this instance that human rights are supposed to evolve, okay? By definition, they are almost utopian in nature. And utopias are, by definition, unattainable. We're always striving towards them. Human rights can be described as utopian in nature. And of course, we will disagree as to the kind of utopia that we want to achieve. We see this debate within human rights themselves, between the clash between civil and political rights, or between socio-economic rights. What is the utopia that we want to achieve? And then we have individuals as well who even criticise human rights as actually wanting to achieve, actually doing good. So we have this idea of the dark side of virtue, of human rights actually doing more harm than good. But the point I raise this is that I think it is incredibly naive to think that human rights really did reach their peak in 1950 when the European Convention of Human Rights was drafted. They certainly didn't reach their peak in 1215 when the Magna Carta was signed. They didn't reach it in the Declaration of Independence. And if a Bill of Rights is enacted, this certainly wouldn't have stopped evolving then. They're going to keep evolving in future. Okay? So if we are to take kind of any positive legacy from Magna Carta, I think it should be that this idea that rights evolve and that the progress and that the very things that politicians praise Magna Carta for are also the things that